Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right in because today we are unpacking one of the most absolutely unbelievable true stories in human history. We're looking at a sweeping, epic historical tragedy, the life of King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. With the help of the animations in this explainer, we're going to trace the incredible journey of a young ruler who defied medical science, political intrigue, and frankly, overwhelming military odds, all while his very own body was betraying him. So how exactly did a dying teenager hold off the 12th century's absolute greatest warlord? I mean, it sounds like the plot of a fantasy novel, right? But it's entirely real. This is the central, almost impossible tension of our story today. On one side, you have a unified, massive military machine, and on the other, a boy slowly succumbing to a horrific disease.
Section 1. The Boy Who Felt Nothing. To really understand how this all happened, we have to start at the beginning. Baldwin grew up in the Crusader states. This was a highly militarized, yet surprisingly culturally diverse Kingdom of Jerusalem. It was a place where Arab tutors actually taught him to ride horses, and where his main duty in life would be defending a state that was basically under constant siege. Tracking this timeline, you can really see how rapidly this conflict builds. In 1095, Pope Urban II preaches the First Crusade. By 1099, Christians conquered the Levant, establishing these Crusader states, which were often called Outermare. But Muslim resistance was incredibly fierce. In 1144, the city of Edessa falls, and that sparks the Second Crusade. And then, in 1161, Baldwin IV is born. So he is born into a kingdom that is fundamentally always under threat.
Now, a simple childhood game actually ended up revealing a really dark destiny. His tutor, the historian William of Tyre, noticed something chilling while Baldwin was just playing with other noble children. The boys were pinching each other, and, while the others cried out in pain, Baldwin felt absolutely nothing. William actually wrote that, quote, half of his right arm and hand was dead so that he could not feel the pinchings at all. What William initially thought was just, a really tough, stoic disposition turned out to be a terrifying symptom.
The diagnosis was Hansen's disease, historically known as leprosy. Now today, we know it's a bacterial infection that takes prolonged exposure to spread. But in the 12th century, wow, it carried an immense social stigma. It was widely perceived as a literal punishment from God. Traditionally, lepers were expected to just completely segregate themselves from society. So for an heir to the throne, whose primary job was to lead armies in a highly militarized state, this diagnosis made ruling seem entirely impossible.
Section 2. The Shadow of Saladin.
In 1174, Baldwin's father, King Amalric, tragically dies of dysentery. He passes the crown to a 13-year-old boy. Baldwin inherited what can only be described as a total geopolitical nightmare. Look at this matchup. On one side, you have a terminally ill teenager ruling a fractured kingdom, completely unable to marry or sire an heir. On the other side, Saladin, a healthy, highly experienced Muslim warlord who had just managed to unify Egypt and Syria. This effectively cut off the Crusader states and gave Saladin access to vast pools of reinforcements. The survival of Jerusalem rested entirely on the frail shoulders of this boy.
Section 3. The Miracle at Montgisard. Let me tell you, this boy was not about to just surrender. In 1177, Saladin makes a massive, bold move. Seeing that many Crusader forces were far away campaigning up in northern Syria, Saladin decides to march deep into the Kingdom of Jerusalem. He thought the capital was utterly defenseless. He brought thousands upon thousands of soldiers. Meanwhile, Baldwin is scrambling to muster whatever defense he possibly can alongside his commander, Renaud of Chatillon. They had maybe a few hundred Crusader knights and a small auxiliary force. By all historical logic, this immense, terrifying numerical disparity should have been the absolute end of the Kingdom of Jerusalem.
But Baldwin completely flips the script in a series of shocking maneuvers. And seeing this battle animated really drives home how crazy this was. First, Saladin got overly confident and dispersed his forces to raid the countryside. Big mistake. Baldwin caught them completely by surprise near Montgisard. Second, and honestly this is just incredible, despite his leprosy, the teenage king personally leads a devastating heavy cavalry charge straight into the center of Saladin's lines. The impact was catastrophic. Saladin's ranks literally collapse into this chaotic, unorganized retreat. And finally, for 2 whole days, the Crusaders hunt down the fleeing units. Saladin himself barely made it out alive. Baldwin's sheer willpower resulted in a complete and total rout of the greatest army in the region.
Section 4. A Failing Body.
Montgisard bought the kingdom crucial time, but time was the one thing Baldwin was rapidly running out of. While the battle was a miraculous military achievement, as we move into the 1180s, Baldwin's physical body begins to rapidly and horrifyingly degenerate. William of Tyre recounts the tragic reality of it. His sight failed and his extremities were covered with ulcerations so that he was unable to use either his hands or his feet. The contrast here between his physical decay and his mental fortitude is just astounding. I mean, he lost the ability to ride a horse, he went blind, yet he refused to just give up. He insisted on continuing to attend state councils. When his kingdom was threatened, he literally had his men carry him out on a litter to command his troops in the field. His face became a mass of scabs, but he led anyway.
However, willpower alone cannot solve a succession crisis. Without an heir, the fragile kingdom was a ticking time bomb. Baldwin was forced to rely on his older sister, Sibylla. She ended up marrying a French knight newly arrived in the Levant named Guy of Lusignan. Because Baldwin couldn't have children of his own, desperate political maneuvering, bitter rivalries among the nobles, and this highly controversial marriage totally dominated the king's agonizing final years.
As Baldwin's ability to directly manage these nobles started to wane, a brutal cascade of failures began. First off, the Crusaders suffer a devastating defeat at Marj Ayoun in 1179. During that battle, the crippled Baldwin actually had to be carried off the battlefield by a knight just to escape being captured. Second, capitalizing on this chaos, Saladin destroys the newly built Christian fortress of Cheslet. And finally, the internal rot really sets in. Guy of Lusignan, acting brutally and insubordinately, massacres allied Bedouins. This infuriates Baldwin and severely fractures the kingdom's alliances. The stability of Outremer was eroding, and it was eroding fast.
Section 5. The Fall of Outremer.
Baldwin finally succumbed to his illness in the spring of 1185. He was just 23 years old. With his death, the only true pillar holding this fractured, feuding kingdom together was gone, and the unraveling was terrifyingly fast. In 1186, Baldwin's young nephew, Baldwin V, dies prematurely. That allows Guy of Lusignan to officially take the throne, and Guy's aggressive, frankly poor leadership practically guaranteed war. By July 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, Saladin absolutely decimates the Crusader army and captures King Guy. And then, just months later, in the fall of 1187, the siege of Jerusalem ends. After less than a century of Christian control, the holy city falls to Saladin. Everything Baldwin had sacrificed his own body to protect was lost in a matter of months. So what does this all mean for us today? Well, it leaves us with one of history's absolute greatest what-ifs. If the Leper King had lived a full, healthy life, could he have saved Jerusalem? We saw how his mere presence, his tactical brilliance, and his indomitable spirit held Saladin at bay against literally all odds. He ruled a kingdom while his body fell apart, leaving behind a legacy of sheer resilience that still echoes over 800 years later. Thank you so much for exploring this incredible historical explainer with me. I'll see you next time as we decode another amazing story.